The toll bill came in the mail with three out-of-state charges I could not explain. Each one was 200 miles north of where my wife was supposed to be that day. Where she was supposed to be was at her sister's bedside. Her sister had been in the hospital fighting cancer for 14 months. My wife had visited her 31 times in the last year. At least, that was the story she had been giving me. Listen to me for a second. I have been married 19 years. I run a small HVAC company here in Kentucky, and I do every bit of the bookkeeping myself. Household bills, work bills, all of it. That is how I caught it. And by the time I figured out the full picture, which took me one private investigator and 28 days of patience, my wife had been lying to my face for one solid year. Let that sink in. I opened every piece of mail at the kitchen island the same way I have always done it. Bills on the right, junk in the trash, anything for my wife in a stack on the counter. I had not been expecting a toll bill that month. I had not been north of the state line in over 4 years. I tore it open without thinking. Three charges, all of them stamped with the same out-of-state turnpike code, all three from the last 6 weeks. And I knew the dates because the toll bill prints them right there on the page. The first charge was on a day she was supposed to be driving down to see her sister in the hospital. The second was on a day with the same story behind it. The third was 9 days after that. Same story, same drive, same goodbye in the kitchen in the morning. 200 miles north. Her sister was 117 miles south. I walked the toll bill out to my truck. I am not a man who reacts fast. I am a man who reads twice and then thinks for a while. We had 2 kids in college because of how hard the both of us had worked. And here was a piece of mail telling me her car had been somewhere it had no business being. 3 times. I drove back to my office, locked the toll bill in my desk drawer, and called my best buddy from high school. He told me, "Do not say anything to her until you have something she cannot lie her way out of." I gave it 4 days before I brought it up. I wanted to see if she would mention the trip on her own. She did not. On the 5th night, I waited until after dinner, showed her the toll bill, and asked, "Where did this come from?" She picked it up. She read it. Her face did not change, and then she started lying. She said she had loaned the car to her sister's husband for an out-of-state run, and the dates must be wrong. I asked her how her sister's husband was driving the car when her sister was in the hospital, and her husband had been at the hospital with her every single one of those days, because she had told me he had. She paused. Then she said the toll system must have read the wrong plate. I asked her if she thought a state government toll system run on cameras was reading the wrong plate 3 different times in 6 weeks. She paused again. I want you to picture this for a second. A woman I had built a 19-year life with, sitting at the kitchen island in the same shirt she had worn to dinner, trying to convince me that a state-run toll camera was malfunctioning the same way 3 different times. Then she said she had driven up there to see an old friend who was going through a hard time, and she had not wanted to bother me with it. 3 different stories in 90 seconds. Listen, I do not know if you have ever sat with someone you have been with for 19 years and watched them lie to you in real time, but the way her mouth moved was not the way I was used to. She was reaching. She was watching me to see what would land and what would not. I told her I would think about it. I took the toll bill back, walked it out to the truck, and locked it back in the desk drawer at the office the next morning. I never raised my voice one time during that conversation, not one time, because I already knew what I was going to do next. 11 days after that conversation, I noticed the transponder was gone. We had a transponder mounted on the windshield of her car for years, the little white box with the suction cups, the one the toll system reads at highway speed. It was gone. Slot was clean, suction marks still on the glass, but the unit was gone. She had pulled it. I did not say anything to her about it. I just waited. 30 days later, the next toll bill came in the mail. 2 more charges, same out-of-state turnpike, same 200 miles north, both on days she had told me she was at the hospital. I read it twice and laughed in the kitchen for the first time in a month. Here is what I learned that night, and I want every man watching this to remember it. Modern toll systems do not need the transponder. When you yank that little white box off the windshield, the toll camera reads your license plate as a backup, and the system bills you the same rate, sometimes a higher rate. Some of these turnpikes will tack a $4 surcharge per pass for plate-only tolling. She had pulled the transponder thinking the trail would stop. The trail did not stop. The trail got stamped right onto the next bill in a font I could read in my sleep. She still did not know the cameras had her. She still drove that route, and I had 2 more bills with 5 total charges between them and 0 explanations she had not already burned through. Time will tell on people. It always does. I gave it another 3 weeks before I called somebody who could lock the door behind her. I hired a private investigator on a 30-day retainer for $3,400. She came recommended by my brother-in-law, a man who is a deputy in another county, and has used her on 3 separate cases. She had been doing this work in Kentucky for over 20 years. She was licensed by the state. She was bonded and insured. She was quiet about her cases, and that mattered to me as much as anything. I met her at a diner in town and laid the toll bills on the table along with my wife's calendar for the next 6 weeks. She read everything in about 20 minutes. Then she started to ask me a few questions. How many times a month does she go to see her sister? Does she always leave at the same hour? Does she always come home at the same hour? I told her about 3 times a month, always 6 in the morning, always between 9 and 11 at night. She told me she would tail her on the next 3 trips and bring me a photo file at the end of the month. Her rate was $95 an hour with a flat retainer for the surveillance days, plus mileage and any equipment she needed for the longer drives. She told me to do nothing, keep working, keep being a husband, do not change one thing about how I treated her. She told me men ruin these cases all the time by getting impatient and tipping their hand. She told me my job for the next 30 days was to keep my mouth shut and let her do the work. I went home and did exactly that. I made her coffee in the morning. I asked her how her sister was doing. I asked her if she needed money for the drive. She told me her sister was hanging in there and the drive was fine and she would be back by 10 that night. She walked out of the house at 6:04 in the morning. The investigator's car was waiting 2 blocks down. 30 days went by. I worked. I went to my softball league at the rec center, the one I have been on since my oldest was in middle school. I am 47 years old and still playing third base, and that league is just about the only thing in my life that has stayed the same through all of this. I came home every night. I waited. On the 28th day, the investigator called me from her office. She said she had a folder and I needed to come pick it up. I drove to her office on the 2nd floor above an insurance shop. The folder was sitting on her desk when I walked in. She gave it to me without a word and let me open it myself. And I knew before I opened it that it had everything I needed. Inside were photographs, 3 separate trips, 3 different days my wife had told me she was driving down to the hospital. Each trip stamped with date, time, mileage, everything signed by the investigator. Trip 1. My wife pulling into a hotel parking lot 200 miles north a little after 9 in the morning. A man waiting for her on the 3rd floor walkway. Tall, mid-50s, wedding ring on his hand in the 2nd photograph. Trip 2. Same hotel, same parking spot, same man waiting on the same walkway. Trip 3. Same hotel, same man, but this one had a sequence I will not forget. My wife getting out of her car, the man walking down to meet her, both of them in the parking lot, kissing for what the investigator clocked at 41 seconds before they walked inside. The 4th photograph in that sequence is the one that hit me the hardest. It was a side shot of her face as she walked into that hotel. She was smiling. It was the smile she had given me for the first 12 years of our marriage, and somewhere along the way had stopped giving me without me noticing. The investigator had also pulled the registration on the vehicle the man was driving. She had cross-referenced his name through public records. He lived in another state, owned a small business of his own, and had been married to a woman named on the deed of his house for 22 years. He had 2 kids. I closed the folder and asked her what I owed her. She told me what the remainder was, which was $4,500, and handed me a thumb drive with all of the photographs and the notarized timestamps backed up in 3 formats. She told me to make a copy that night and put one in a safety deposit box at my bank. She had seen wives delete evidence from joint computers before. She had seen them pull thumb drives out of desk drawers and burn them in the fireplace. I made the copy at the office before I drove home. I drove that folder to my divorce attorney's office the following morning. My attorney was a younger woman in her late 30s. She read the toll bills, the investigator's file. She took about 33 minutes. Then she set the folder down and asked me if I was sure I wanted to file. I told her I had been sure for 28 days. Then she explained Kentucky to me one piece at a time. Kentucky is a no-fault divorce state, but Kentucky maintenance, what most people call alimony, is governed by a statute that lets the court consider all relevant factors, including marital misconduct, the toll bills, the investigator's photographs, and the year-long pattern of deception, all qualified as marital misconduct. She told me my HVAC business I started and owned before our marriage was separate property, with only the increase in value during the marriage subject to division. The commercial building was the same. The marital home was joint, but the equity split would be subject to a just and right division, and Kentucky judges are allowed to weight that division in light of who blew up the marriage. Her retainer was $6,000. I wrote the check. She filed the petition the following week and arranged for my wife to be served at home on a quiet afternoon while I was at the office on purpose. I had moved out the day before into a 1-bedroom rental. My wife was served at 4:42 in the afternoon. She called me 6 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. She called me 14 more times in the next hour. Then she drove to my office. I had told my receptionist not to let her pass the front desk. She stood in the lobby and screamed, "Listen, I have been with this woman for 19 years, and I have never heard her use language she used in that lobby. She told me I was destroying our family over a misunderstanding. She told me I had no idea what I was doing. She told me her sister was going to die thinking her brother-in-law had abandoned the family. She told me she would take everything I had ever built. I looked at her one time and gave her one sentence. My attorney has the toll bills and the photographs. She left in 30 seconds without another word. Her own attorney called mine the next morning and asked for a settlement conference. The settlement conference took 4 hours in a conference room neither one of us had ever been in. Her attorney opened with a request for 36 months of maintenance, half the marital home equity, and a percentage of the increase in value of my business since the marriage date. My attorney walked her through the toll bills, the investigator's file, and the Kentucky case law on marital misconduct as a maintenance factor. Her attorney made one more push for maintenance and then let it go. There was nothing for him to push back with. The toll bills had her plate. The investigator had her on camera. The hotel had her on its records. By the time we walked out of that conference room, my wife had agreed to no maintenance, a 60-40 split of the marital home equity in my favor, and zero claim against the increase in the value of my business. She kept her own retirement account. She kept her own car, and she paid 100% of her own legal fees. The judge signed the final decree 23 days later at a 12-minute hearing. The judge asked me if I had read the agreement I told him I had. He signed it and wished me good luck. I drove back to my HVAC shop and sat in the truck in the parking lot for about 10 minutes in somewhat of a daze before I went back inside. 19 years of a marriage ended on a piece of paper I folded into thirds and put in the glove box. I want to leave you with something my buddy from high school told me on the day I called him about the toll bill. He said, paper does not lie. Cameras do not lie. People lie. Time will tell on people. It always does. And when it does, you do not need to scream and you do not need to fight. You just need to be patient enough to let the paper do the talking. The man she had been meeting at that hotel, I never reached out to him. I never reached out to his wife either. I figured the same toll bills that had caught my wife would catch him eventually too. And about 6 months after my decree was signed, I heard through my investigator that his wife had finally filed her own. Apparently, his wife was already doing some digging on her own. Her investigator had been doing some surveillance on her husband the same way my wife had been under surveillance. I did not ask the investigator how that case turned out, and I did not need to. Some men learn the hard way. Some men never learn at all. Either way, the cameras are still there, and the cameras do not blink. See, this is the problem with no-fault divorce states. Even though he kind of sort of came out on the upper end, she still got 40%. Just saying. Until next time.